They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but nobody tells you that the person serving it might be someone you destroyed 12 years ago, someone you sent to prison for a crime you committed, someone who's been planning, waiting, becoming someone new, just to get close enough to take everything from you. My name is Sarah Harper, and the night my water broke on stage in front of 500 people, while a 20-foot photo of my husband embracing his mistress glowed behind me, I thought that was rock bottom. I was wrong, because his mistress wasn't just sleeping with my husband. She was carrying his child. She'd infiltrated every corner of my life, and she had a plan that would cost me my mother, my family, my sanity, and my baby. The worst part? I deserved it. Because 12 years ago, I made a choice that destroyed her life, and now she was going to return the favor. This is the story of how one lie created a monster, how that monster spent over a decade planning the perfect revenge, and how two women, both guilty of unforgivable things, destroyed each other in ways that would change everyone around them forever. Stay with me, because this story doesn't end the way you think. And if you want to hear stories about real human darkness, real consequences, and real survival, hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment telling me which decision you think was worse, mine or hers. And share this with someone who understands that the line between victim and villain is thinner than we'd like to believe. Now, let me tell you how it all fell apart. They say the moment your life changes, time slows down. They're wrong, it speeds up. And by the time you realize what's happening, you're already standing in the wreckage. I learned this truth on a Tuesday night in December, wearing a custom emerald Vera Wang gown that cost more than my childhood home, standing backstage at the Metropolitan Museum of Art with my 6-month pregnant belly pressed against a podium. 500 of New York's wealthiest people waited in the grand ballroom beyond the velvet curtain. I was about to give the keynote speech on second chances and rebuilding after crisis. The irony would be funny if it hadn't destroyed my life. My name is Sarah Harper, 34 years old, former award-winning architect, current trophy wife to tech billionaire Nathan Harper, 6 months pregnant with our first child after a devastating miscarriage 2 years ago. High-risk pregnancy, doctor's orders to avoid stress, complete bed rest for the first trimester. But tonight was important. Nathan's charity gala, our first public appearance since the pregnancy announcement. I touched my belly, felt our daughter kick. "Your first big event, sweet girl," I whispered. "Let's show them how it's done." The event coordinator appeared at my elbow. "Mrs. Harper, 2 minutes, are you ready?" I wasn't. My hands trembled slightly. I'd been feeling off all evening, some instinct telling me to stay home. But Nathan had insisted. "We need to present a united front," he'd said that morning over breakfast, not looking up from his phone. "The board is watching. Investors are watching. Always the company, always the image." I smoothed my dress, took a breath, and walked toward the stage entrance. The corridor passed through the Impressionist gallery, Monet and Renoir on the walls, soft lighting creating intimate shadows. That's when I saw them, 50 feet away, through an archway, in the sculpture court. Nathan, my husband, with a woman in a blood-red dress, his arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her close. An intimate embrace, possessive and familiar. His hands slid down her back. She leaned into him like she belonged there, like she'd done it 1,000 times before. Then he reached up and fastened something around her neck. Even from this distance, I recognized it. My grandmother's ruby necklace. The Harper family heirloom Nathan had promised would be mine when we got married. The one he said was locked in our bedroom safe. A photographer's flash went off, capturing the moment. Nathan's face caught in the light. His eyes met mine. Time stopped. He froze mid-embrace, arms still around her, mouth slightly open. The woman turned, and I saw her face clearly. Sharp black bob, red lipstick, predatory smile. Tori Blackwell, head of corporate strategy at Harper Technologies. The woman Nathan hired 9 months ago. "Mrs. Harper?" The coordinator touched my arm. 30 seconds. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The hallway tilted. "Mrs. Harper, you're on." Somehow my body made a choice my brain couldn't. I turned away from my husband's frozen face and walked onto the stage. Spotlight hit me like a physical force. 500 people applauded. Behind me, a massive screen showed rotating photos from the event. I gripped the podium, feeling the smooth wood under my palms, and forced my mouth to form words. Good evening. Tonight we're here to talk about second chances. My voice sounded steady, professional, like I wasn't dying inside. About rebuilding when everything falls apart. About finding strength in... The applause grew louder. Confused, I glanced at the teleprompter screen. In its reflection, I saw what was behind me. The photograph. 20 feet tall, Nathan and Tori wrapped in each other's arms, the ruby necklace glinting at her throat. Gasps rippled through the audience. Phone cameras lifted everywhere. My voice cracked. Second chances are for people who... I stopped, felt something warm running down my legs. Looked down at the puddle forming beneath my elegant dress. My water had broken. On stage, under the spotlight, in front of 500 people and 100 phone cameras. Who deserved them? I finished, even as my knees buckled. The last thing I saw before the world tilted was Nathan pushing through the crowd, his face a mask of horror. Not for me, for the scandal. Then everything went black. I woke up in an ambulance, Becca Martinez's face above mine. My best friend since college, an emergency room nurse at Mount Sinai, had been my guest at the gala. Now she held my hand while paramedics worked. The baby? I managed. Still inside, still fighting. We're almost there. Nathan? Becca's jaw tightened. Haven't seen him. The hospital was chaos. Doctors stopped my labor with emergency medications. Baby was okay for now, but I needed complete bed rest for the next 3 months or risk premature delivery. Any stress could trigger labor again. Blood pressure was dangerously high. Dr. Patricia Coleman, my obstetrician, looked at me sternly. Mrs. Harper, any more stress could kill you or your baby. You need absolute peace, Bartas. 3 hours passed. Becca helped me change into a hospital gown, carefully folding the ruined Vera Wang dress. The perfect dress for the perfect life, now destroyed. Nathan didn't call, didn't text. At 4 a.m, he finally rushed in, disheveled, smelling of perfume. Not my perfume. Chanel No. 5. I was allergic to Chanel No. 5. I couldn't get away, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. The event, the press, I had to do damage control. Not, are you okay? Not, is our daughter safe? Damage control. The baby? He asked. Still pregnant? Barely. Good, that's good. He ran his hands through his hair. His wedding ring caught the fluorescent light. Sarah, that photo, it wasn't what it looked like. I stared at him. What was it then? Tori was upset about the Sterling deal falling through. I was comforting an employee, a colleague. The necklace was a corporate gift, a bonus. The timing was terrible, I know, but that necklace was your grandmother's. You told me it would be mine. No, sweetheart, you're confused. That was a replica, for the photo op. PR suggested it. You know how these corporate events are. His voice was so smooth, so confident. Pregnancy brain, honey. It's completely normal. Pregnancy brain, gaslighting wrapped in concern. Nathan, your arms were around her waist. She was crying. I've known her for 9 months. We work closely together. I was being a supportive boss. Every answer practiced, rehearsed. He kissed my forehead, cold and dutiful. You need rest. We'll talk about this when you're calmer. Then he left. Didn't stay the night, didn't sit by my bedside, just left. I stared at the ceiling, feeling our daughter kick, and let myself acknowledge what I'd been denying for months. My marriage was a lie, and I had no idea how deep that lie went. The next day, alone in my hospital room, I did what any modern woman does when her world collapses. I Googled my husband's mistress. Tori Blackwell, Harper Technologies. LinkedIn appeared first. Professional photo, sharp suit, calculated smile. Recruited from Redstone Capital after orchestrating $500 million hostile takeover. Known for finding weaknesses and exploiting them. That phrase made my stomach turn. I kept scrolling. Company events, always positioned next to Nathan. One caption read, Harper Technologies Dynamic Leadership Duo. I clicked images, dozens of photos, holiday party last December, Nathan's hand on her shoulder. Spring product launch. Tori whispering in his ear. Summer retreat. Both of them laughing at some private joke. 9 months of photos. 9 months of a woman slowly replacing me. Then I found her personal social media. Sparse, carefully curated. But one photo stopped my heart. Posted 6 years ago before she changed her profile settings to private. A college photo. Tori with dark hair pulled back, younger face, genuine smile. Standing with a group of girls. One of those girls looked familiar. I zoomed in, hands shaking. It was me. Tori Blackwell and I had gone to college together. I couldn't stop staring at the photo. My 22-year-old self, arms slung around a girl I barely remembered. We weren't close friends, barely acquaintances, different majors, different social circles. But we'd been in the same dorm freshman year. Her name wasn't Tori Blackwell then. It was Victoria Morrison. The name hit me like ice water. Victoria Morrison. Memories I'd buried for 12 years came flooding back. A spring night, a party in Brooklyn, too much drinking, a terrible decision, a car accident. My phone buzzed. Becca, checking in. But I couldn't talk to her yet. Not until I understood what this meant. I kept Googling, hands trembling so badly I could barely type. Victoria Morrison, Ohio. The search results made me want to vomit. Obituary. James Anthony Harper, age 22, beloved son, brother, friend, survived by girlfriend Victoria Morrison. Harper. Nathan's last name. I grabbed my phone, called David, Nathan's older brother. We'd stayed close even as my marriage crumbled. David had demons of his own, 5 years sober from opioids, but he'd always been honest with me. Did Nathan have another brother? I asked when he answered. Long pause. James, he died 12 years ago, suicide. Why? My heart hammered. Who was his girlfriend? Victoria. She went to prison for a car accident. James couldn't handle it. Why are you asking me this? What was Victoria's last name? Morrison, Victoria Morrison. Sarah, what's going on? I hung up and called him back immediately. I need to see you now. Tell me everything about Victoria Morrison. An hour later, David sat in my hospital room looking like he might be sick. I'd signed myself out against medical advice. Becca drove me to David's apartment in Williamsburg, furious but loyal. David's hands shook as he poured coffee he wouldn't drink. You want to know about Victoria Morrison? Everything, from the beginning. He sat down heavily. 12 years ago, Nathan was 26, starting his first company. James was 22, senior at NYU. I was 30, working at an investment bank and taking pills I shouldn't have been taking. And Victoria? James's girlfriend, 20 years old, sophomore, beautiful, smart, seemed nice enough. James was crazy about her. Keep going. There was a party, end of spring semester. Brooklyn, you were there actually, dating Connor Mitchell, James's roommate. The memory crashed over me. I had been there. Connor and I had been together for 6 months. I'd met James, met his girlfriend Victoria. We'd all been friends in that casual college way. David continued, around 2 in the morning, 4 of you decided to get food. You, Victoria, Connor, and James. Connor was too drunk to drive. James was high. Victoria volunteered, but you insisted you were fine. I wasn't fine, I whispered. I'd had 6 drinks, maybe 7. You ran a red light, T-boned another car. The driver was a 34-year-old teacher named Melissa Hartford, paralyzed from the waist down, traumatic brain injury. I closed my eyes. I remembered all of it now, the impact, the screaming, the blood. Victoria told the police she was driving, David said. She took the blame to protect you. She thought she was being noble. Why would she do that? Because she loved James. You were Connor's girlfriend, and Connor was James's best friend. She didn't want to see you go to prison. She thought it was the right thing to do. But I let her, I said, shame burning through me. When my lawyer father explained I could face 5 to 10 years, I let her take the fall. I testified that she was driving. I lied under oath. David nodded. Victoria got 18 months, served 11 in Rikers. They released her early for good behavior. And then, James couldn't handle the guilt. His girlfriend in prison for an accident she didn't cause. He started using. Got worse and worse. 6 months after Victoria got out, he killed himself. Intentional overdose. The room spun. I killed him. No, James made his own choice, but Victoria blamed everyone. You, Connor, me for being too high to give good testimony, Nathan for not stopping any of it. David's voice dropped. But mostly you, because you lied. She disappeared after that? Changed her name. We never heard from her again. David looked at me with haunted eyes. Until a year ago. What? She found me at my NA meeting, knew everything about me. My relapse last year that nobody else knew about. Had photos, texts, proof. Said if I told Nathan who she really was, she'd send everything to my employer. I'd lose my job, my credibility, everything I'd built. So you stayed quiet. I'm a coward, he whispered. I let her into our lives, into Nathan's company. I watched her get close to him, and I said nothing. I'm so sorry, Sarah. I felt like I was falling. This wasn't just an affair. This was revenge, calculated, patient, 12 years in the making. She didn't want Nathan, I said slowly. She wanted to destroy me. David nodded, and she's doing it perfectly. I spent the next 3 days in Becca's apartment, confined to bed rest, mind racing. Nathan sent flowers daily, texts saying he had fired Tori, that it was over, that he was sorry. All lies. I hired a private investigator. Within 48 hours, I had photos of Nathan and Victoria at a hotel, time-stamped from yesterday. The affair had never stopped. Then came the package. No return address. Inside was a positive pregnancy test, an ultrasound photo labeled Baby Boy Harper, 14 weeks, dated from last week, and a note in elegant handwriting. Congratulations. Looks like our boys will be brothers. Can't wait for our families to merge. T. Victoria Morrison wasn't just having an affair with my husband. She was pregnant with his child. I called my lawyer immediately. Marcus Wells, the best divorce attorney in Manhattan. He listened to everything, then said something that made my blood run cold. Mrs. Harper, I need to tell you something about your therapist. Dr. Elena Rost? What about her? Her full name is Elena Morrison Rost. I found her mother's obituary while researching Victoria's background. They're sisters. The room tilted. My therapist. The woman I'd been seeing twice a week for 18 months. The woman I'd told everything to. My fears about Nathan, my anxiety about the pregnancy, my darkest thoughts. She was Victoria's sister. Everything I'd said was being recorded, documented, twisted. Building a case that I was unstable, unfit, dangerous. They weren't just trying to destroy my marriage. They were trying to take my baby. Marcus Wells laid out the evidence on his conference table like a prosecutor building a murder case, which in a way, he was. The murder of my life as I knew it. Sarah, we have a problem, and he said, pushing papers toward me. Everything Victoria has done is unethical, immoral, but most of it isn't technically illegal. She's been planning this for years. She got my husband to cheat. She's pregnant with his baby. My therapist is her sister. Documenting me as unstable. How is that not illegal? Having an affair? Legal. Getting pregnant? Legal. Your therapist recording sessions? You signed consent forms. Even David's recordings of Victoria's threats are inadmissible because he recorded without her consent in New York. I wanted to scream. So she just wins? No, Marcus leaned forward. We make her confess. On a legal recording, with your consent, with her knowing she's being recorded, in a public place. She admits to conspiracy, to extortion, to drugging Nathan for that sex tape, and we have her. She'll never confess. She will if she thinks she's already won. That's how I found myself 3 days later, 37 weeks pregnant, wearing a wire under my maternity cardigan, walking into Westwood Cafe to meet the woman who was systematically destroying my life. Victoria sat at a corner table, 6 months pregnant herself, glowing with victory. She stood when she saw me, extended her hand like we were business associates. Sarah, thank you for coming. I shook her hand, felt the recording device press against my ribs, and sat down. The detective had been clear. I needed explicit admissions. Conspiracy, fraud, drugging, all on tape. You look good, I said. Pregnancy suits you. Thank you. It's been an adjustment, more consuming than I expected. She touched her belly with practiced tenderness. When are you due? 3 weeks, maybe sooner. The stress has been hard on the baby. I can imagine. No sympathy in her voice, just cold assessment. We ordered coffee, made small talk about the weather. Every word felt like playing chess with a master. Finally, I made my move. I wanted to meet because I think you're right. Her eyes flickered. About? Everything. I'm not fit to be Grace's mother. Not right now. She sipped her tea slowly. That's very mature of you to recognize. I need to understand something, though. How did you do it? How did you plan all of this? I don't know what you mean. Victoria, it's over. I'm not fighting. I just need to understand. Long pause. She was deciding whether to trust me, whether I was really surrendering. You really want to know? She finally asked. I think I deserve that much. 3 years, she said softly. 3 years of planning every detail. I changed my name, built a new career, studied Nathan's company, his weaknesses. I engineered dependency. Nathan isn't complex. He wants validation, admiration, control. I gave him all three. And your sister? Elena? She smiled. You figured that out. I'm impressed. Elena and I have always been close. She was in medical school when I went to prison. After James died, she dropped out, dedicated herself to helping me. By becoming my therapist. By documenting your mental instability. Every session, every word, it's all on record. My hands clenched under the table. The wire was catching everything. The baby shower, you sent that box. I wanted you to see it, to know Nathan was mine, completely. You got pregnant on purpose. Of course, I needed insurance. A baby binds him to me forever, and it gives me what I really want. What do you want, Victoria? At first, I wanted you to suffer, like I suffered in prison. I wanted you broken, humiliated, destroyed. But then I realized suffering ends. Death ends. I wanted something permanent. Grace, your daughter will call me Mom. She'll grow up with my son as her brother. She'll never know you. You'll be the crazy woman Nathan saved her from. She leaned forward, and every time I look at her, I'll remember that I took her from you, just like you took everything from me. I kept my voice steady. The accident was 12 years ago. I was a kid. You were a drunk driver who let me go to prison for your crime. Her voice rose. Other diners looked over. She lowered it again. James killed himself because of the guilt. Because I went to prison. You destroyed my life, so I'm taking yours. You drugged Nathan for that sex tape. Rohypnol, easy to obtain. He doesn't remember anything. Perfect blackmail material. You framed him for embezzlement. I've been moving money for months, all traced to his accounts. The SEC case will take years. By then I'll have custody and a settlement. Keep her talking, I thought. Get it all on record. My mother. Did you know that video would kill her? Her face remained cold. I knew she had a heart condition. I hoped it would cause stress, but I can't take credit for her death. That's just good fortune. Sociopath. I was sitting across from a complete sociopath. You called Child Protective Services. Anonymous tip, can't be traced, but Elena's therapy records sealed the deal. You're documented as a danger to yourself and your baby. What if I told you I have proof, recordings, evidence, everything? She laughed. I'd say you're bluffing. And even if you're not, who would believe you? You're the crazy woman who destroyed her own nursery on camera. I'm the successful executive who's giving your husband the family he deserves. She leaned back triumphant. You already lost, Sarah. This conversation is just closure for you. I stood up, touched my cardigan. The signal. You're right about one thing. This is closure. Detective Sandra Bishop entered with 4 officers. Victoria Morrison, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, extortion, and drugging a victim without consent. Victoria's face went through shock, rage, understanding. You bitch? You were recording? Every word. As the officers cuffed her, she started screaming. You think this changes anything? Elena has those therapy tapes. They'll still take your baby. I'll fight this from prison. I'll never stop. Neither will I said quietly. You killed James. You destroyed my life. I was innocent. You lied and sent me to prison. Everyone in the cafe heard it. Phones recorded it. The context made her look unhinged. But I knew the truth. She was right. I had created this monster. And now we both had to live with the consequences. The prosecution moved fast. Victoria and Elena were both denied bail, considered flight risks after investigators found fake passports and tickets to Brazil in Elena's apartment. The trial began 6 weeks after my daughter was born. Grace Elena Harper came into the world at 38 weeks, 5 pounds, 2 ounces, in an emergency C-section after my blood pressure spiked to dangerous levels. She spent 3 weeks in the NICU with respiratory issues. I spent those 3 weeks fighting for the right to even visit her. Child Protective Services, armed with Elena's falsified therapy recordings, had placed Grace in temporary state custody. I was allowed 2 supervised hours per day, nothing more. Becca stayed with me every moment, holding me together when I wanted to fall apart. David visited daily, his own guilt eating him alive. Nathan was in a psychiatric facility, having suffered a complete breakdown after the truth came out. But I couldn't think about any of that during the trial. I had to focus on putting Victoria Morrison behind bars. The courtroom was packed. Media frenzy. Tech billionaire's pregnant wife versus vengeful ex-con made for compelling television. Victoria's defense strategy was brilliant in its simplicity. She was the real victim. Her lawyer stood before the jury, a sympathetic woman in her 50s named Diane Rothschild. Ladies and gentlemen, my client spent 11 months in Rikers Island for a crime she didn't commit. The real drunk driver, Sarah Harper, lied under oath, sent an innocent woman to prison. That same drunk driver is asking you to punish Victoria Morrison for seeking justice. The courtroom murmured. I felt eyes on me, judging. Then it was my turn to testify. Mrs. Harper, the prosecutor asked, is it true you testified falsely at Ms. Morrison's trial 12 years ago? I looked at the jury, 12 strangers who would decide my fate, my daughter's fate. Yes, I lied under oath. Victoria went to prison for an accident I caused. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Even the prosecutor looked surprised I'd admitted it so directly. Why are you admitting this now? Because the truth matters, even when it hurts me. What I did 12 years ago was unforgivable. I was young, scared, and I made a terrible choice. I turned to the jury. But what Victoria did in response, planning to take my child, destroying lives, that's not justice, that's revenge. Victoria's lawyer stood. So you admit you destroyed my client's life? Yes, what I did was wrong. Then some would say she was entitled to revenge. Some would say 2 wrongs don't make a right. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The wire recording played in open court. Victoria's voice cold and calculating, admitting to drugging Nathan, framing him for embezzlement, manipulating CPS, planning to flee the country with both babies. David testified about her threats, his voice breaking as he admitted his own cowardice. Elena, facing her own charges, flipped on her sister to save herself. She revealed the full plan. Victoria intended to get full custody of Grace, then disappeared to Brazil with both children. Nathan would have been left with nothing, destroyed professionally and personally. The prosecution showed evidence of fake passports, offshore accounts, detailed escape plans. Victoria's mask finally cracked when they played the recording about James. James killed himself because of the guilt, her voice said on the tape. Because I went to prison. You destroyed my life. So I'm taking yours. She stood up in court, screaming. She destroyed my life. James is dead because of her. I spent 11 months in hell for a crime I didn't commit. The judge ordered her removed. Security dragged her out while she screamed obscenities. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, guilty on all counts. Sentencing came a week later. I sat in the back of the courtroom holding Grace, now 2 months old and finally healthy enough to leave the hospital. The judge looked at Victoria over his glasses. Ms. Morrison, what you experienced 12 years ago was a grave injustice. But your response, calculated, cruel, targeting an innocent child, cannot be excused. You had many paths to justice. You chose destruction. I sentence you to 12 years in federal prison. Victoria looked at me as they led her away, not with hate, with something worse, understanding. We'd both made terrible choices. We'd both lost everything that mattered. And she'd lost James and now her son. I'd lost my mother, my family, my marriage, my reputation. There were no winners in this story. 6 months after the trial ended, I sat in a small apartment in Brooklyn, rocking my daughter to sleep. The penthouse was gone, sold to pay legal fees. Nathan's company had declared bankruptcy during the scandal. The divorce settlement was modest at best. My mother was dead. My sister wouldn't speak to me. My father sent birthday cards to Grace but never visited. I was infamous, unemployable at major firms, rebuilding my architecture practice, one small project at a time. But Grace was healthy, thriving, beautiful dark hair, green eyes, Nathan's smile. She was everything. Becca sat across from me, drinking coffee and watching me with concerned eyes. You okay? Define okay. Still having nightmares? Every night, visions of prison bars, Victoria's face, James Harper's obituary, my mother's final phone call, the litany of my sins playing on repeat. I'm managing, I said. Sarah, you need to talk to someone. A real therapist this time. Someone who isn't secretly plotting your destruction. I laughed, but it came out broken. Hard to trust therapists after that. Hard to trust anyone, Becca corrected. She reached over and squeezed my hand. But you're not alone. You have me. You have David. You have Grace. That's family. Grace stirred in my arms, made a small sound, settled back into sleep. She was 5 months old now, starting to smile, to recognize faces, to reach for things. My whole world in 5 pounds of baby. A knock on the door startled us both. Becca went to answer it. I heard voices, then David appeared, looking nervous. Behind him was Nathan. My ex-husband had aged 10 years and 6 months. Thinner, grayer, eyes that couldn't quite focus. He was on heavy medication, living in a group home, slowly learning to function again after his breakdown. Hi, Sarah, he said quietly. Nathan, come in. He sat down, hands shaking slightly. David hovered nearby, protective. Nathan looked at Grace, sleeping peacefully. She's beautiful, he whispered. She looks like you. She has your eyes. Can I hold her? I hesitated. Dr. Coleman had cleared him for supervised visits. David had been bringing Nathan to therapy, to recovery groups. He was trying. I placed Grace in his arms. She stirred, looked up at him with curious eyes, decided he was boring, and went back to sleep. Nathan started crying silently, tears running down his face, shoulders shaking. I'm sorry, he choked out, for all of it, even the parts I don't remember. I was weak. I let her in. I believed her lies because I wanted to. We were both deceived, I said. No, you were betrayed. I was complicit. I made choices, bad choices, and you paid for them. Grace made a small sound in his arms. Nathan looked down at her with wonder. I loved you, he said, in the beginning. That was real. I know. Do you think we can ever? No. He nodded like he expected that answer. Will you let me see her? Regularly? You're her father. She deserves to know you, even if it's complicated. Will you tell her about all of this? When she's old enough, the truth, all of it. He stayed for an hour holding his daughter, crying quietly. Then David took him home. After they left, I sat alone with Grace, watching the sun set over Brooklyn. My phone buzzed, an email from Marcus Wells, my lawyer. Victoria had given birth in prison 2 weeks ago. A boy. Nathan had relinquished all parental rights. The baby was placed with a foster family. Attached was an address. I stared at it for a long time. Then I did something I couldn't quite explain. I set up a bank account. Anonymous donations to the foster family raising Victoria's son. Enough to cover expenses. Give him opportunities. Becca found me doing it. Sarah, what are you doing? The right thing, finally. That's her son. That's an innocent child who didn't ask for any of this. Just like Grace. She watched me for a moment, then hugged me tight. You're a better person than I'd be. I wasn't sure about that. I just knew I couldn't let another child suffer for the sins of their parents. 3 weeks later, I received a letter. Prison postmark. My hand shook as I opened it. Victoria's handwriting, 3 pages, single-spaced. I read it twice, then I folded it carefully and placed it in a box labeled, Grace when you're older. The letter confirmed what I already knew. This story didn't have a happy ending, just an ending. Victoria would serve 12 years, Elena 4. Nathan would spend years in treatment, might never fully recover. My mother was dead. My family was shattered. My career was in ruins. But Grace was safe, healthy, loved. Sometimes that has to be enough. I kept Victoria's letter in my desk drawer for 3 weeks before I could bring myself to read it again. The first time had been enough to shatter whatever remaining illusions I had about closure or justice or redemption. But tonight, with Grace finally asleep after 2 hours of fussiness, with rain pattering against the windows and the city humming its endless song outside, I poured a glass of wine I wouldn't drink and opened the letter. Dear Sarah, by the time you read this, I'll have been in prison for 6 months. They tell me I have 11 and a half years left. Good behavior might reduce it to 8. I'll be 40 when I get out. You'll be 42. Grace will be 9. I've had time to think. Too much time. The therapist here says I have complex PTSD and antisocial personality disorder. Labels, excuses, I know what I am. I'm someone who spent 12 years planning revenge and ended up with nothing. My son was taken from me 2 hours after I gave birth. I held him once, named him James after the man you killed. Then they took him away. Foster care, just like I planned for Grace. The universe has a sick sense of humor. I stopped reading, put the letter down, looked at Grace sleeping in her bassinet, her tiny chest rising and falling. The most precious thing in my world. Victoria had held her son once. One time. I picked up the letter again. You're probably wondering why I'm writing. Not to apologize, I'm not sorry for what I did. You deserve to suffer, you still do. But Elena told me something during her testimony that I can't stop thinking about. You admitted what you did, under oath. You confessed to perjury, even though it meant you looked guilty too, even though it could have hurt your custody case. Why did you do that? I've been asking myself that question for 6 months. The Sarah I knew, the 22-year-old drunk driver who let me go to prison, she would never confess. She would protect herself at all costs. So either you changed or I never knew you at all. The question haunted me because I'd asked myself the same thing. Why had I confessed? Marcus had advised against it, said it would weaken our case, make me look culpable. But I'd done it anyway, because 12 years of lies had to end somewhere. Here's what keeps me up at night. I spent 12 years destroying you, and in the process, I proved that you were right to be afraid of the truth. When you lied at my trial, you were a scared kid making a terrible choice. But I became the monster that justified your fear. I became someone who would drug a man, steal a baby, destroy families. I made you write about me. I closed my eyes. She wasn't wrong. You asked me that day in the cafe what I wanted. I said I wanted you to suffer. But that's not true. I wanted James back. I wanted my life before the accident, when I was 20, in love, and the future was this bright, shining thing. I wanted to undo that night. I wanted you to have been honest. But since I couldn't have any of that, I settled for revenge. And it was empty. Even when I had Nathan, when I was pregnant, when I thought I'd win, it never filled the hole. Because the hole isn't you-shaped, it's James-shaped. And nothing will ever fill that. The rain fell harder. I thought about holes, about the Nathan-shaped hole in my life, the mother-shaped hole, the family-shaped hole, about Grace, who would grow up with a father who barely knew her and a mother who'd been broken and put back together wrong. I need you to know something, Sarah. Not for forgiveness, but for closure. My sister Elena visits me once a month. She told me that you've been sending money to my son's foster family. Anonymous donations, but she traced them. You're helping the child of the woman who tried to destroy you. I don't understand that. I don't understand you. I didn't understand myself either. When I'd set up those donations, Becca had asked me why. I hadn't had a good answer. Maybe because I knew what it was like to grow up without a father, without family, without the resources to build a real life. Maybe because that baby was innocent. Maybe because I was trying to be better than I'd been at 22. Maybe that's the difference between us. When someone hurts you, you try to help. When someone hurts me, I try to destroy. I don't think you're a good person, Sarah. You let me rot in prison for a year. You lied under oath. You were a coward. But I'm not a good person either. I'm worse. And maybe that's the real tragedy. We both did terrible things, but you tried to become better. I became worse. Thunder cracked outside. Grace stirred, whimpered, settled back into sleep. I got up, checked on her, smoothed her dark hair. So much innocence. So much hope. There's one more thing. Elena told me Grace is beautiful. Dark hair, green eyes. Looks like you. I'm glad I didn't get her. Not because you deserve to keep her, but because she deserves better than me. Nathan visits me sometimes. Did you know that? He's heavily medicated, barely coherent, but he comes. He sits in the visitor's room and cries. He says I destroyed his life. He's right, but you know what? He let me. He chose to cheat. He chose to lie. He chose to be weak. Just like I chose revenge over healing. Just like you chose yourself over me 12 years ago. We all made our choices. These are our consequences. I hope you sleep better than I do. Victoria P.S. I named my son James David Morrison. David, after Nathan's brother, the only person in your life who tried to stop this. I thought you should know. I folded the letter carefully, placed it back in the box. One day when Grace was old enough, I'd show it to her, let her understand the full weight of choices and consequences. For now, I just held my daughter and counted her breaths in the dark. A year after Victoria's sentencing, I walked into the Brooklyn Community Center with Grace on my hip and a portfolio under my arm. The center was outdated, falling apart, but serving hundreds of low-income families every week. They needed an architect who understood building on a budget. They needed someone who understood second chances. David worked here now, running addiction recovery groups. He'd recommended me for the project. Pro bono work, nothing glamorous, but it felt right. The director, a woman named Patricia Chen, looked at my portfolio with interest. These are impressive. Why aren't you working for major firms? Long story. I Googled you, she said bluntly. I know the story, I'm asking anyway. I appreciated the honesty. I made mistakes. I'm trying to do better. She studied me for a moment. Grace grabbed at my necklace, babbling happily. Your daughter is beautiful. Thank you. The center needs help. Budget is tight. Timeline is aggressive. Can you handle it? Yes. She extended her hand. Then let's rebuild this place. That's how I rebuilt my life, one small project at a time. Community centers, affordable housing, public schools, work that mattered, work that helped people who needed it. The money wasn't great, but it was honest. Nathan visited Grace twice a month now, supervised by David. He was getting better, slowly, could hold conversations, remember things. He'd never be the man he was before, but he was trying. Grace was 14 months old, walking, saying a few words. Mama and Becca and Bird. She loved birds. We'd spend hours in Prospect Park watching pigeons. My sister Kate sent a card on Grace's first birthday. Just a card, no visit, no phone call, but it was something, a crack in the wall. My father sent money every month, never visited, but he sent money. I was building something new. Not better than before necessarily, just different, more honest. Becca remained constant. She and Tyler came over every Sunday. We'd make dinner, let the kids play, pretend everything was normal. Sometimes it almost felt true. Then I'd wake up at 3 in the morning from nightmares. Victoria's face, the accident, my mother's final call, James Harper's obituary. The past never really left. It just learned to coexist with the present. One afternoon while Grace napped, I received an email from an unfamiliar address. Subject, James David Morrison. My hands froze on the keyboard. I opened it. Ms. Harper, my name is Jennifer Torres. I'm the foster mother caring for James David Morrison. Your attorney gave me your email address and said you might be open to communication. I want you to know that James is thriving. He's 15 months old now, walking, laughing, learning sign language. He's a happy baby despite a difficult start. Your donations have been a godsend. We've been able to provide therapies, education, opportunities we couldn't have afforded otherwise. But more than financial support, I wanted you to understand the impact of your choice. You didn't have to help this child. His mother tried to destroy you. You owed him nothing. Yet you chose kindness anyway. That choice changed his life, and it taught me something important about breaking cycles. James will grow up knowing he was wanted, loved, given chances. That's a gift. Thank you, Jennifer. I read the email 3 times, then saved it in a folder labeled Grace's Future. One day I'd tell my daughter about the boy named James, about his mother, Victoria, about the choices that led to all of this. I'd tell her the truth, the messy, complicated, morally gray truth, and I'd hope she learned to make better choices than I did. Grace's second birthday fell on a Tuesday in December, exactly 2 years after my life had imploded at that gala. Becca insisted on throwing a party. Nothing fancy, just us, David, Tyler, a few parents from Grace's playgroup, cake and presents, and children shrieking with joy. Normal. Blessedly, wonderfully normal. Nathan came for an hour, supervised by David. He brought a stuffed elephant. Grace examined it solemnly, decided it was acceptable, and toddled off to show Tyler. Nathan watched her with such longing it hurt to see. "She's perfect," he said quietly. "She is. Like you." I didn't know how to respond to that. We weren't those people anymore. The couple who'd fallen in love over architecture and ambition. We were strangers who shared DNA with a toddler. "I'm getting better," he said. "DeReynolds says I might be able to move to independent living next year." "That's good, Nathan. I'm writing you letters, in therapy, letters I'll never send, trying to understand what happened, how I let her in, how I became someone I don't recognize. We all became people we don't recognize." He looked at me then, really looked at me. "Do you ever forgive yourself?" The question hung in the air between us. Did I forgive myself for the accident, for the lie, for letting Victoria go to prison, for creating the monster who destroyed so many lives? "I'm working on it," I said. "Forgiveness is a process, not a destination." "That's very therapist of you." "I'm in therapy 3 times a week. I've learned the language." He smiled just a little. Then Grace came running back, elephant clutched in one hand, chocolate cake smeared on her face. "Dada!" she squealed, showing him the toy. Nathan's eyes filled with tears. First time she'd called him that unprompted. "Hi, baby girl," he whispered. After he left, Becca helped me clean up while the kids played. "That was good," she said, "him being here." It felt strange. Everything about this situation is strange, but you're handling it. Am I? I loaded plates into the dishwasher. Sometimes I feel like I'm just pretending to be a functional human, going through the motions. That's what functional humans do. We all fake it until we make it. Inspiring. I'm a realist. She grabbed my hand, made me look at her. "But seriously, Sarah, you've rebuilt. You have a career again. Grace is thriving. You're managing Nathan's visits with maturity. You're sponsoring Victoria's kid. You're doing better than fine." I don't sleep. Join the club. I haven't slept well since Tyler was born. Welcome to motherhood. I laughed despite myself. When did you become the wise one? I was always the wise one, Darren. You just married rich and forgot. We finished cleaning. Tyler and Grace played until both were exhausted. Becca packed them up, hugged me goodbye. Same time next week? Wouldn't miss it. After they left, I put Grace to bed. She fought it, as always, wanting one more story, one more song, one more glass of water. Finally, she settled, clutching her new elephant. "Dada," she murmured sleepily. "Yes, baby, Dada loves you." "Mama. Mama loves you too." "Bird." "Yes, we'll see birds tomorrow." She drifted off. I sat in the rocking chair David had given us, watching her sleep. 2 years old, growing so fast. Soon she'd start asking questions I didn't have good answers to. My phone buzzed. Email from Marcus. "Victoria's parole hearing is in 8 years. As the victim, you have the right to submit a statement. Thought you should know." 8 years? Grace would be 10, in 4th grade, maybe playing soccer or taking piano lessons. Living a life Victoria would miss entirely. Would I oppose her parole, fight to keep her locked up, or acknowledge that 8 years might be enough time for someone to change? I didn't know yet. I had 8 years to decide. For now, I just watched my daughter sleep and counted my blessings, one day at a time. 5 years after Victoria's conviction, I was standing in line at a coffee shop in Park Slope when I heard the name that still made my chest tighten. James, come here, sweetie. I turned, a woman in her 40s, Latina, warm smile holding the hand of a 5-year-old boy, dark hair, Victoria's eyes, Nathan's jawline, Jennifer Torres, Victoria's son's foster mother. I recognized her from the photo she'd sent in one of her annual updates. Our eyes met. Recognition flickered across her face. Miss Harper? Sarah, please. Grace was at kindergarten. I was alone, vulnerable, face to face with the woman raising my ex-husband's son, with the woman who tried to destroy me. I'm sorry, Jennifer said. I didn't mean to intrude. James, stay close. The boy looked up at me with curious eyes. 5 years old, the same age as his brother, Grace's half-brother, would have been if the baby shower revelation had been true. Instead, James was 7 months younger than Grace. It's okay, I said. You're not intruding. Awkward silence. The barista called the next customer. Jennifer collected her coffee, ushered James toward the door. Then she paused. I send you updates, she said, but I never know if you actually want them. I read every one. Really? Every word. I want to know he's okay. She studied me for a long moment. Would you like to meet him? Properly? My heart hammered. This was Nathan's son, Victoria's son, a living reminder of everything that had shattered my life. But he was also an innocent child, and I'd been helping raise him from a distance for 5 years. Yes, I said, I'd like that. We met the following Saturday at Prospect Park. Jennifer brought James, I brought Grace. The kids eyed each other warily, the way 5-year-olds do. Then Grace offered to share her crackers, and they became instant friends. Jennifer and I sat on a bench, watching them play. He asks about his birth mother sometimes, Jennifer said quietly. I tell him she made mistakes but loved him very much. That's generous. It's true. In her own twisted way, Victoria loved that baby. She just loved revenge more. We watched James chase Grace around the playground. He had Nathan's laugh, Victoria's intensity, a combination of two broken people. I'm adopting him, Jennifer said. Officially, his birth parents both relinquished rights. He'll be James Torres. That's wonderful. I wanted you to know, in case you ever wanted to tell Grace about her half-brother. I'd thought about this moment for 5 years. How to explain to my daughter that her father had another child, that her mother's enemy had given birth to her sibling. Not yet, I said, but someday, when she's old enough to understand. Understand what? That families are complicated, that people make mistakes, that we're all connected in strange ways. Jennifer nodded. For what it's worth, what you've done, helping him, Victoria doesn't know. I've never told her. Why not? Because I don't think she could handle it. Knowing that you, of all people, are the reason her son is thriving, it would break whatever's left of her. Some petty part of me wanted Victoria to know, wanted her to feel that particular knife twist. But a larger part of me, the part that had been growing slowly over 5 years of therapy and rebuilding and learning to live with my choices, didn't need that victory. Keep it that way, I said. It's not about her, it's about him. Grace ran over, breathless and happy. Mama, James is really fast. I see that, baby. Can he come to my birthday party? I looked at Jennifer. She looked back, a question in her eye. If his mom says yes, I told Grace. Please, James added, with Victoria's determined expression. We'll see, Jennifer said, the universal parent response. The kids ran back to the playground. Jennifer and I sat in comfortable silence. Thank you, she said eventually. For what? For being better than you had to be. I didn't feel better. I felt tired, older, scarred, but I was trying. That had to count for something. Grace was 7 years old when she asked the question I'd been dreading. Mama, why don't I see Daddy more? We were making breakfast. Saturday morning, pancakes, the radio playing soft jazz. Normal routine, but the question shattered it like glass. I turned off the stove, sat down at the table across from my daughter. 7 years old, smart, perceptive, old enough to notice that her father only visited twice a month, Always supervised, always briefly. Daddy got sick, I said carefully. A long time ago, before you were born. And he's still getting better. What kind of sick? The kind that lives in your brain. That makes it hard to think clearly or make good choices. She considered this, fork pushing pancakes around her plate. Is it my fault? No, baby, God, no. This has nothing to do with you. Then why? Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, big ones, and those mistakes have consequences that last a long time. What mistakes did Daddy make? How do you explain this to a 7-year-old? That her father had an affair with a woman seeking revenge for a crime her mother committed. That the affair produced a son, Grace's half-brother, currently living in Park Slope with his adoptive mother. That her grandmother died from the stress of it all. That her mother sent a woman to prison for a year and had been living with the guilt ever since. You don't. Not at 7. He trusted the wrong person, I said simply, and that person hurt a lot of people. Did they hurt you? Yes. Well, did they hurt Daddy? Yes. Did they hurt me? I looked at my daughter, healthy, happy, thriving, good grades, best friends, loved gymnastics and reading and birds. She had dance recitals and soccer practice, and a mother who would burn down the world for her. They tried, I said, but they didn't succeed. She thought about this, then resumed eating pancakes. Crisis apparently averted. Mama? Yes, baby? I'm glad they didn't hurt us. Me too. After breakfast, she went to her room to play. I cleaned up the kitchen, hands shaking slightly. That conversation had been easier than expected, but it was just the first of many. Soon she'd ask why her grandmother was dead, why Aunt Kate didn't visit, why we lived in a small apartment when Daddy used to be rich, why there were news articles about us if you Googled our names. Soon I'd have to tell her the truth. All of it. The phone rang, unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Hello? Ms. Harper? This is Warden Michelle Rodriguez from Bedford Hills Correctional Facility. My stomach dropped. Is Victoria? Miss Morrison is fine. She asked me to call you. She has a message. I don't want to hear anything she has to say. It's important, please. I waited, heart pounding. Ms. Morrison wanted you to know that she's been approved for a college program. She's studying social work. Want us to help people when she gets out. And she wanted me to tell you, thank you for James. I couldn't speak. She knows about the donations, about Jennifer, about everything you've done. She wanted you to know she knows. I don't want her gratitude. She's not offering gratitude. She's offering acknowledgement. There's a difference. The warden paused. For what it's worth, Ms. Harper, I've worked here 20 years. I've seen a lot of inmates. Most don't change, but some do. Ms. Morrison is trying. It might not mean much to you, but it means something. After I hung up, I stood in my kitchen looking at the photos on my refrigerator. Grace at her dance recital. Grace and Tyler at the park. Grace with Nathan, one of his good days, both of them smiling. And one photo I kept hidden in a drawer. All of us at that community center I'd redesigned. Me, Grace, David, Becca, Tyler, Jennifer, and James. Taken at the ribbon-cutting ceremony last year. 2 families connected by tragedy, choosing to move forward together. I pulled out the photo now, looked at James's face. 7 years old, bright kid, wanted to be a veterinarian. Victoria's son being raised by Jennifer, supported by my anonymous donations, playing with his half-sister who didn't know they were related. The cycle could have continued. Revenge breeding revenge, hate breeding hate. Instead, we'd all made a different choice. Not forgiveness necessarily, but something close to it. Grace came back into the kitchen. Mama, can James come over to play? Asked Jennifer. If she says yes, then yes. Yay! She ran to get her phone, the one we'd given her for emergencies, to text Jennifer. I watched her, this miracle child, and thought about all the ways this story could have ended. Victoria could have succeeded, could have taken Grace, could have destroyed us all completely. Nathan could have died, could still be a vegetable, could have never recovered enough to know his daughter. I could have broken, could have given up, could have let the guilt consume me. But none of those things happened. Instead, we survived. Messy, imperfect, scarred, but alive. Grace returned, breathless. Jennifer says yes, James can come over. Okay, baby. Can I tell her that James is my brother? I froze. How did you bow? I heard you talking to Aunt Becca last week. You said James was my half-brother. Of course she had. Children hear everything. Yes, I said. He is. Cool. I always wanted a brother. She said it so simply, so matter-of-factly. Like having a half-brother whose mother tried to destroy her family was just another fact of life. Maybe that's what resilience looks like. Not pretending the pain doesn't exist, but refusing to let it define you. Come here, I said. Grace climbed into my lap, getting too big for it, but still small enough. I held her tight. I love you, I said, more than anything in this world. I love you too, Mama. Whatever happens, whatever you learn about the past, remember that. Okay? Promise? Promise. She wiggled free, ran back to her room. I sat alone in the kitchen, crying quietly. Not from sadness, not from regret, from relief. We'd made it, against all odds, through everything. We'd made it. That night, after Grace was asleep, I pulled out Victoria's letter from 7 years ago, the one I'd saved for Grace to read someday. I added a new document to the box, a letter of my own. Dear Grace, by the time you read this, you'll know the whole story. Your father's affair, Victoria's revenge, the accident that started it all, my lie, your grandmother's death, all of it. I won't apologize for protecting you from this knowledge when you were young. Childhood should be innocent, but now that you're old enough, you deserve the truth. Here's what I want you to understand. People are complicated. Your father made terrible choices, but he loves you. Victoria tried to destroy us, but she was operating from a place of profound pain. I lied and sent an innocent woman to prison, then spent 12 years trying to pretend it never happened. We all failed. We all hurt people. We all carry guilt that shaped our choices. But we also all tried to do better, eventually. Your father got help. Victoria is studying to help others. I rebuilt my life around honesty and service. We didn't erase the past. We learned to live with it. That's what I hope you learn from this story. Not that we were perfect, but that we tried. That when we fell, we got back up. That when we hurt people, we tried to make amends. You have a half-brother named James. He's a good kid, kind, smart, curious. He doesn't know about any of this yet either. Jennifer will tell him when he's ready. One day, maybe you two will talk about it. Compare notes. Laugh about how complicated your family tree is. Or maybe not. Maybe you'll choose to keep your distance. That's okay too. The point is, you have choices. That's what all of this was about. Choices and consequences. I chose wrong when I was 22. I've spent 18 years living with that choice. But I also chose right when it mattered most. I chose you. I chose to fight for you. I chose to be better than I was. That's all any of us can do. Choose better. Learn from the past. Try to hurt fewer people along the way. And when you fail, because you will fail, we all do, get back up and try again. I love you more than you'll ever know. Mama, I sealed the letter, added it to the box, and put it back in my desk. Grace would read it someday, maybe at 18, maybe at 25, maybe never. But it would be there when she needed it. The next morning, James came over. The two kids played in Grace's room while Jennifer and I drank coffee in the kitchen. You told her, Jennifer said, not a question. She figured it out herself, heard me talking to Becca. How'd she take it? Said she always wanted a brother. We laughed. Kids, so resilient, so accepting of things adults found impossible. Victoria knows, I said, about everything the warden called. Jennifer nodded. I know. She wrote to me, first letter in 5 years, said she was grateful. Said she understood what you'd done. Said maybe she'd do the same if their positions were reversed. Do you believe her? I don't know, maybe. People can change. Prison either breaks you or forces you to rebuild. Victoria seems to be rebuilding. I'll believe it when I see it. Fair enough. We sat in silence, listening to the kids laugh in the other room. Two children who should have been enemies, who could have inherited their parents' hate. Instead, they were just kids. Playing, being friends. Maybe that was the real victory. Not winning, not revenge, not even justice. just breaking the cycle, just choosing over and over again to be better than our worst moments. The sun streamed through the kitchen window. Somewhere in Bedford Hills, Victoria was studying for her social work exam. Somewhere in Manhattan, Nathan was in therapy, slowly recovering. Somewhere in Connecticut, my father was thinking about the granddaughter he'd never really known. And here, in this small Brooklyn apartment, two kids played while their mothers drank coffee and tried to figure out how to explain a past neither of them had control over. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, but it was an ending. And after everything, that was enough. Grace poked her head into the kitchen. Mama, can we get pizza for lunch? Sure, baby. Can James stay? If Jennifer says yes. Yes, both kids chorused. They ran back to Grace's room, already planning their pizza toppings. Jennifer smiled. Kids make it look easy. Because for them, it is. They don't carry all our baggage. Lucky them. Lucky us for learning from our mistakes, for giving them a different story. She raised her coffee cup. To different stories, I clinked my cup against hers. To different stories. Through the window, I could see the Brooklyn skyline. The city that had witnessed my destruction and my rebuilding. The city where I'd made my worst choices and my best ones. It was a beautiful morning, and for the first time in years, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, everything would be okay. Not perfect, not without scars, but okay. And sometimes okay is the best victory of all.